Hey everyone, this is John from EastCoastArmory.com, and I'm here today with another 1/35 scale workable track link review and tutorial video for the ACE model workable track links for the Elefant/Ferdinand tank family. For the project that these tracks are being used on, I have here a Dragon 1/35 scale Ferdinand tank destroyer. This here is going to be the subject matter of its very own model showcase video. Spoiler alert, awesome kit, but more on that in that video to be mentioned. However, as awesome as a kit as it is, unfortunately being a Dragon kit from recent years, it does suffer with the track that are supplied with the kit, which are individual link and length. They claim they're magic tracks. I say that's a meme. Magic track is just link and length by another name, and they both have the same problems. Either way, I'm not going to go into philosophical argument about why link and length tracks suck, and they do. Instead, we're going to need to replace the stock tracks with a set of aftermarkets. And when it comes to aftermarket tracks for Ferdinand and Elefant-based vehicles, there are several on the market. Some have been on the market for many years, and some are a relative newcomer. For the vehicle, or I should say for the tracks I'm using on this vehicle here, they're going to be the metal workable track links from the company ACE Model. These tracks here I picked up, I believe, either off eBay or AliExpress if memory serves, and the link to where I actually purchased them will be found in the video description listed below. These tracks here I picked up for about, I want to say, 20 to 25 US dollars, or possibly a little less. A little hazy, it's been a while since I actually ordered these things, but either way, I have a set on hand, and we're going to be reviewing these tracks and see how they mate and fit onto the Dragon vehicle. As a quick side note, you'll note that at this time the tank is fully built, painted, weathered, and it's actually been varnished and is basically coming towards the end of its production, and this is when I always go ahead and mount on the tracks. Some people like to mount the tracks on before the model's painted and weathered. I think that's crazy and bonkers. Me, I like to do it like they do on the real one, where the vehicle's essentially complete, and then you put the tracks on at the very end. But either way, we're going to see how these tracks are mated and fit onto this vehicle as the video goes on. Without further ado, let me go ahead and get this guy off the table, so I have the table space here just for the tracks in question. Okay, with the table cleared off, you get to see the tracks in better light. It's from the company ACE Model. Again, this is a Chinese-based company, so when you order these things, they are going to be procured from overseas. Like I mentioned before, there are lots of options out there for tracks. Another option would be from Fru Model. I actually built a set a little while ago and used them on the VK4502 hybrid build that I did a number of years ago, and that video can be found on the ECA channel as well. So I have done Elefant tracks and Ferdinand tracks in this scale in metal before, so it's going to be interesting to see how these compare. As for the packaging, first I want to say the item number. It's ACE Model WL078. And the pieces come nice and packed in this little clear plastic box over here, which is a nice touch. It is, I believe, vacuum sealed. Is there some scotch tape on it? I don't know. Oh, nope, so I don't need the X-Acto. Okay, so everything is bagged. Here, these tracks are a white metal alloy, which means more than likely there is some lead in the mix over here, which means, again, you want to be careful for lead exposure. You want to work in a space that has no food preparation or any sort of children around, because obviously lead and those two ingredients don't mix well. And on top of that, after you're done working on these things, you might want to wash your hands frequently. Not go full OCD mode, but it definitely helps to keep your hands nice and clean after handling these things. Not so much after they're painted, but we'll circle back as the video goes on. Okay, so pouring out the tracks on the table. So Elefant and Ferdinand tracks are in a male-female type format, where we have one version with a tooth, and the other version here is toothless. And when you're assembling the vehicle, you got to make sure that the two mate accordingly. Otherwise, you may have two of the same links, and that's not helping you. So here's the one with the tooth. Right here. And here's the toothless one here. So these are just two random links I just pulled out of the parts bag, and so far they look pretty good. Let me see the face detailing on them. So this one here is the type of track that I believe has the curve to them. When it comes to these Ferdinand tracks, there are two patterns available. One is a straight cleat, and the other one has like a little bit of a curve to it. This one, I believe, may be the curved or the straight one. No, I think this is a straight one, and this is relevant for one vehicle or another, but for the purpose of this build here, these tracks should be more than suffice. Looking at the quality of the castings, they look to be very good. the holes appear to be drilled out. However, I wouldn't be surprised if I may run into a link or two that may have some spludge into these sections over here that do need to be cleaned out. And also the hinge sections look pretty good as well, but again, it's not uncommon to have a link that may need a little hand fitting just because there may be some casting flash or two. Matter of fact, this one over here does appear to have a little bit of casting flash right there and there, so some polish work is going to be seen. But again, this is on par with all the other metal links that I've, or just about all the other metal links I've built in the past from other manufacturers. Also supplied with the sets are a bunch of metal pins. The pins appear to be steel and are pre-cut to shape. And this is a nice touch. Generally, when you work on something like from Fruli or I believe even Master Club, they just give you a spool of wire. So having actual pins is, don't want to lose you, is a nice touch. They are definitely steel, nice and rigid. There's no burrs on either end, and the pieces are nice and clean from the get-go. And let's just try one going raw over here. See if they fit. Yeah, they fit okay, but I do see some hand fitting that is going to be required in order to get the holes widened slightly so that the pins fit in a bit easily. So again, this is part and parcel for links that are similar to this from various companies. And as for how to do that, well, let me clean off the table and show the tools that I really need for this assembly. So after assembling one set of track, I went ahead and was able to figure out exactly what tools I need to use to assemble one of these sets. And those tools are right here on the table. So we have here just a pair of small needle nose pliers, a little box here of sewing pins, a pin vise, and also a little scrap here of sandpaper. Essentially, all the components that you see here on the table are available on Amazon.com, or you'll be able to find some of the things in your local craft store, i.e. the sewing pins and the small needle nose pliers. The sandpaper can be found in any hardware store, and as for the pin vise, well, that's something, again, you're going to probably be able to pick up online. This one here I picked up off of AliExpress eons ago, but these things are, again, very commonly found on Amazon. As for the sandpaper itself, it is 120 grit, and that seems like a good type of grit for deburring any sort of burrs that may be found on the tracks. The only thing that's also not supplied or seen on the table is just a small little wire cutter, and the wire cutter is primarily used just to snip the head off of the pin over here to put it into the pin vise. As for the sewing pins, the ones you want are these ones over here, which are the longer pattern. And again, these are found in any craft store. Hobby Lobby is definitely one that comes to mind. So what you need to do is, the whole point of the pin here is to just clear and slightly widen the holes found molded onto the track links in order for the pins to slide on easily. If you just try to go in raw, the pins will fit, but they will require a little bit of extra coercion in order to get the pins in place, and this could potentially cause damage and you can break the track. Because the pieces are soft metal, they are somewhat pliable, and if you're putting force into something, what will happen is the hinge will probably just bend out of the way as opposed to the hinge pin properly getting seated. And in order to clean everything out, the sewing pin here is a great way to do it. You don't need a Dremel bit for this, just a simple sewing pin is all you need. The only thing you have to do, like I said before, is to snip this little section off here with a pair of wire cutters, like say, oh, I don't know, this one here I have on the table. Again, found in any hardware store and or Amazon, or Harbor Freight in this case. Yes, I should have had this on the table, but we're just going to build it as we fly it. Anyway, so now that you've seen the tools, once the stem, or I should say the little head of the pin is removed, you then go ahead and secure it into the pin vise, and you want to have a decent amount emitting from this portion over here. Obviously, you want to have a good length on the pin so that you have enough clearance for the pin to go all the way through the track link without it bottoming out somewhere on the middle or three-quarter section. Something else that you'll also notice as missing on the table in terms of tools is a bottle of super glue. Frankly, not necessary. So that is a good, refreshing bit of information, specifically if you watch any of my other TrackLink tutorial videos. And here you get to see one of the track bands fully assembled. I already went ahead and pre-tested it onto the vehicle, so I know that it fits absolutely perfectly, and with the proper track tension that an Elefant, or in this case a Ferdinand, does need. The tracks are very long, and if you ever worked on any of these vehicles before, namely the models of course, yeah, this is going to be something that is going to be the case. Also, like I stated before, you want to pay attention to the orientation. You want to have a stagger type tooth setup. And this is definitely important when it comes to the end. You don't want to have the same type of tooth on each side, because then that will also cause some problems. And with something like this, that can easily happen. Before I go ahead and show the assembly, I just want to say the tracks go together extremely quickly. It was ridiculously quick how fast these things went together, and I'll show exactly how during the construction portion. The tracks are also very, very flexible. The hinge work is excellent on them, and this is something that generally is true for metal tracks. There are some excellent plastic tracks out there, no doubt. However, the metal ones are always the best. They just go together more easily, I find. They're more robust, and also they just hinge so much better. This comes at the expense of cost, but again, we'll circle back to that towards the latter half of the video. But so far, these tracks here are really proving to be a great benefit. Also, one other thing I want to mention is that the sprockets on the Dragon kit do time very well with these tracks over here, which is awesome. Timing is the one place that can make or break you on the set of tracks, and fortunately, I haven't really ran into too many problems with timing on these videos in the past, and this one here is also no exception. Okay, well, with this one out of the way, I'm going to quickly snail him up, set him aside, and I'm going to go ahead and start the next track bands. Okay, so again, you want to go ahead and grab one of each, so a tooth and a toothless. You can also go ahead and grab another version over here, so you can actually burn the candle on both ends, which will actually cause the track to get assembled much quicker. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly just do a quick little once over on the back portion here of the tracks. This is not something that you have to do, but it just seems like something that helps if there are any sort of burrs that are on the surface. You can go ahead and just polish them away quite quickly. And that's really all there is to it. As you see, I don't have to put a whole lot of emphasis on that. Just one or two passes, really all you need. And again, this is not necessarily something you have to do. So I'm now going to go ahead and look at the link, make sure that there's no clump in this section over here. And this one here has a small little flake, and with the pin vise here, I could just poke him out of there, and the guy just flings off. Okay, like here's one right here. Obviously, you want to do this because this can interfere with the hinging when it comes time for assembly. So with that out of the way, it's now time to go ahead and enlarge the holes. All the thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the pin vise over here, and I'm basically just going to run it through the hinge section, and it will quickly go ahead and go through the hinge sections, which will open up the tolerances if it needs to, or also push out any sort of debris if there's some in the channel. And as you can see, it makes short work of it. The one thing I do have to mention is that you have to be careful with your fingers. We do have a sharp point over here, and we are working with a lead-based alloy, or at least I think it's a lead-based alloy. Either way, you want to make sure your fingers are nowhere near the pin section, because you could accidentally poke yourself, and that's not really helping. Okay, so from this point here, I'm just going to go ahead and line up the hinges, just like so. Once they are lined up, they just clip directly into place. And just for good measure, with the pin vise, I just run it through this section over here, which helps align the holes and also helps remove any sort of material if it needs to. At this point here, I go ahead and grab one of the pins, and I could just go ahead and slide it into the location. And with the plier over here, I can go ahead and just press it in where it needs to slide in. As you can see, I encountered zero resistance, and the one thing that's nice about the thin little needle nose portion over here is that I could go ahead and push the pin all the way in, and with the way these Ferdinand tracks are, if it gets in focus that is, there is a small little recess in this portion over here, and the pin needs to slide in all the way flush. And with a small little needle nose plier like this, you can see how I can just push the thing all the way in till it's nice and flush. After that, the hinging is done, and I could go ahead and grab the other link, throw it on the opposite side like this, and do the exact same procedure. And as you can see, it just slides directly into place without any sort of problems. And the hinging is also accomplished. So basically, rinse, wash, repeat until you have enough track links assembled to mount on one side of the vehicle. Well, after about an hour and a half or so, the entire second band was put together. Mind you, I was able to get both bands assembled on the same day within an hour or so apart. So these tracks go together ridiculously fast. And I can already see in the comment section someone saying, oh, but the Link and Link tracks go together quick too, or they're quicker. Nah, actually they're not. I know this because I actually assembled a little set of the Link and Link tracks that are supplied with the kit right over here. And no, these things actually are way more fiddly because there's no locking point and the tracks just want to buckle all over the place. So these things, outside of being used for the spares, are pretty much worthless and take longer to build than these ones here and don't look nearly as good. So with that out of the way, the track bands now are going to head off into paint. And before I do that, I just want to mention at this point here, once the tracks are out of here, I'm going to clean up the table. You can see here the little pile of dust from the filings from just polishing down some of the links, and also you can see just what my fingertips look like after handling them. So obviously you do want to make sure you thoroughly clean and disinfect everything after you're done assembling the tracks. And this brings us to paint. So when it comes to painting these things, because they're made out of metal, these things are basically impervious to any type of paint that you can throw at it. Be it acrylic, be it from the El Cheapo spray paint, to even the more premium spray paints, they will have absolutely zero effect on the surface of the tracks because, again, they are made out of metal. As for the paint itself, I can either roll with El Cheapo flat black spray paint, or I can roll with the more premium Rust-Oleum stuff that I use on my radio-controlled armor techs. That stuff is a really dark gray color and does a fantastic job with mimicking the look of the parkerization that is found on these tracks themselves, or not really a parkerization, more of like an oxide coating, which would again be found on these tracks. However, that stuff is pretty expensive, so I'll save it for the armor tech builds, and I can just roll with a can of El Cheapo flat black spray paint and then achieve the same look with some other weathering effects. Either way, these tracks here are ready to head off into paint, and if you're painting them, they have, again, are impervious to any sort of paint, but also another plus, and it comes back down to the material. Once the sections here are thoroughly coated in paint, the lead contamination is much, much, much more reduced and mitigated compared to the way we have it in its El Natural material, and that's beneficial on a multitude of different levels. So, with that out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and get these things painted. And here we have the tracks fully painted and weathered, and at this point here, they're ready for installation. For the paint work, I went with El Cheapo flat black spray paint, like I mentioned before, and then for the weathering effects, this was done with both the airbrush with a thin layer of, or I should say a heavily diluted layer of Tamiya Nadelbrack that was airbrushed on, and then for the worn steel effects, it's done with my usual dry brushing technique. This was done to both the inner and outer portions, as you can see. Some people out there that work with these metal tracks, they like to take some steel wool and they abrase the surface with the steel wool or emery cloth in order to rub the paint off and get the bare metal that's underneath to be exposed. That technique does work. However, me personally, I like to go with the paint method for two reasons. One, you are sealing and covering the material of the tracks. So you may remember these are lead alloy base, so any sort of protection from the lead material is always a benefit. And also with the paint effects, you get literally the exact same results without the need of having lead to be exposed. So me personally, that's why I like to roll within that format, but some people out there, their results may differ. Anyway, so now that the pieces are fully painted and weathered, we are ready to install them onto the vehicle. And here's the model that the tracks are going to be fitted on back onto the table. Since the previous scene, I went ahead and installed the, get this guy off here, the sprockets found on the rear, and this was done specifically because of with the way this vehicle is designed. Generally, if anyone have ever seen my other workable track link tutorial videos, I like to pre-time the track around the sprocket and then install onto the vehicle in that format because it's a great way to make sure everything times up perfectly, and it has the added benefit of knowing exactly where the master pin is in order to pin it together, and as well as it also streamlines and makes things a bit easier in the long run. However, with a Ferdinand/Elefant, it's a bit harder to do for the simple reason that on this pattern of vehicle, it's much like a Stalin, where we have mud scoops found on the inner portions here. And with the way the vehicle's designed, once the tracks are installed, you're not exactly going to get access to the mud scoops found on the rear portion of the vehicle. So these have to, the sprockets need to be pre-installed first, and then the mud scoops get installed afterwards. This means to install onto the vehicle, it's going to be a little bit more trickier compared to other type of vehicles, but I will show a technique on how to do it. Also, you'll notice that the sprockets are free spinning. This is obviously going to be important for the track to time and roll around the unit in this format. If you just try to install the track, if the sprockets are glued on, with the tolerances over here and the clearances, you're really not going to be able to do it. So the sprockets have to be movable for this installation to occur. As for the front sprockets, these are also, again, free spinning, as you can see, and I went ahead and scraped off the layers of paint on the two shafts over here, just so that the piece can fit on in a much more efficient manner. When you're building and painting everything off the model, you will have layers of paint built up on the road wheel axles and the sprocket axles, and this just comes with the territory with both primer, paint, weathering, and even varnish. And the side effect is that it will build up layers on these certain areas over here that will close up the tolerances and make installation a bit more stiff and difficult. You can potentially break things if you have them in this format, which is why I recommend just taking an X-Acto and just scraping off the layers of paint until finally the piece can slip on in a easily done manner. And when it comes time for installing the tracks, you'll see exactly why. And here's the vehicle with one of the tracks fitted in place. As always, I like to test fit on one of the sides before I walk you through the actual procedure, because, well, it gets a little bit practice in. Anyway, you can see how the tracks work, or I should say look when fitted in place. And with that out of the way, let's go ahead and flip it over, and I'll show you exactly how to do it on the opposite side. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to put some bubble wrap here on the table in order just to protect the tank's surface from getting any sort of scratched or potentially harmed in any way. Okay, so with that out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and grab the other sprocket, and I'm going to time it to the track. Here's the other sprocket. Off camera, I took an X-Acto and I just removed a little bit of paint that was found on the inner recess over there where the axle spins. And if I go ahead and test fit it onto the model, you'll see that it spins and slides on without any sort of issues. Also, really quick, the keen-eyed amongst you would be like, yeah, John, but you didn't install the rear one because of the mud shoe, but there's another mud shoe on the front one. You're right. You're absolutely correct. This is going to be added after the track is installed because, unlike the one on the rear, the one on the front has open tolerances, and it's easier to get in there with a tweezer or a plier to install the part. That, yes, I will show momentarily. But let's go ahead and get to the installation of the track first. So the first thing you want to do is you want to get the proper orientation of the track, and although the track looks symmetrical, that's not the case. I was looking at lots of pictures of the real Elefant and Ferdinand that are still in existence, and from the photographs I've seen, the track, the front portion of the vehicle is in this format here. So if the thing gets into focus, you can see that the center ice cleat here has a triangular or trapezoidal type shape to it, and you want the wide portion to be on the bottom. So if the tank was coming at you, this is what the track would look like. With that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and find a good portion of the track where I can install the pin and also time it on the sprocket. So this looks like a good spot if there was any. And I'm just going to go ahead and time the track onto the sprocket just manually. As you can see, the track times onto the Dragon sprocket without any sort of issues, which is excellent. Okay, hopefully this should pan out. That's probably, by the way, the hardest thing on filming these videos. Either get a knuckle fest, or it's just hard to get things on camera. Alright, so let's go ahead and try to get this on camera now. So I'm going to take the track, and I'm just going to line it up onto the row wheels. I'm just going to let it slink into this portion over here. Okay, until it makes contact with the sprocket. One advantage about the track, since they are metal, they have some mass to it, so having them line up is actually something that does happen very easily. Alright. Once it's at this point over here, I can put the vehicle down and line the teeth onto the track. It's one of those things where it's a little easier to do when you're not filming, but hey, I was able to pull it off. Alright, so once it's engaged into the teeth, you just pull it as if the thing was driving. eat up the slack. And at this point here, I'm ready to install the sprocket onto the front. Again, make sure it times. That's a good spot right there. And then just wiggle the guy in place until he slides into his sweet spot. At that point there, I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that the teeth are timed on both the front and the rear. And to help time the track on the top portion, you can use a popsicle stick. I got a little spatula over here. Yes, I should have more likely have mentioned this in the tools in the beginning, but again, I build it as I fly it. There we go. Once you have the teeth timed onto the rear one and on the front one, it's time to go ahead and connect the two sections. At this point here, I'm going to take the pin vise with the sewing pin again, and I'm just going to go ahead and run them through the holes just to make sure that the tolerances are nice and opened, and the resistance of the installation of the pin is going to be much more reduced. Even though I did this before, again, with the buildup of layers of paint, it can add some thickness that can turn around and bite you. So I did that to both of the tracks individually. Now I'm going to hinge them together, and I'm going to run the pin in them again to both line up the holes and also to, again, make sure that the tolerances are nice and open. When the things aren't painted, they tend to stick a little bit better, like that. And from this point here, I'm just going to go ahead, run the pin through like this. Once it's in, pull it out, set this guy aside, grab the track pin, and I'm just going to go ahead and pin the thing together. And as you can see, the track pin just slides right in without any sort of resistance. And once it seats, you're good to go. At this point here, you just want to make time the track teeth into the middle portions of the row wheels, like so. And at that point there, I'm going to go ahead and time them also onto the top. This is where the spatula really comes in handy. Just go ahead and just pick the track until finally it goes into its happy sweet spot. Alright, I'm going to set the thing down. The track is now installed. However, I'm not out of the neck of the woods yet because, again, I have to install the mud scoops found on the two front sprockets. As for installation, it's done with the kit method. You just simply remove it, deburr it, add the drop of glue in the appropriate location. Then with those little pliers over here, carefully slip it into the place where it needs to go. Just make sure you grip it in the right spot. Find that little happy sweet spot right here. And press them in. As I stated before, as you can see with the one on the front here, there's much more open tolerances to get in here with the tools as opposed to the one on the back, which not only is the tolerances a lot more tighter, the piece is a lot bigger compared to the one on the front, neither of which are helping you if you try to install it in the after fact. And with the piece fully seated, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing to the one on the opposite side. Alright, that should do it. And that's all there is to it. Let me go ahead, clean the table off, and we can go ahead and put a proper wrap up on this video. In the end, as you can see, these tracks did the job absolutely perfectly. Generally, when it comes to these workable track links, metal is by far the best way to do so. However, there are, again, pros and cons to each. Most of the time, the pros are that first, the tracks have a very realistic sag to them. You are using an item that has actual mass to it, which is not really there on plastic links. Definitely there on the metal ones. The model also has a nice little weight to it, and with that, it helps the model settle down on the terrain. It makes for a more properly built, it just feels like a higher quality model. And on top of that, if you have a working suspension, this will also help settle the thing down better on a diorama table. For this model here, that's not really relevant, but the point really still stands. The other added benefit of metal tracks, and that was definitely the case for this one over here, is that they tend to be easier to assemble compared to their plastic counterparts. With the plastic ones, they tend to be a bit fiddly with some of the pins, how they get installed in place. And they are also much more frail and fragile and are susceptible to potential breaking in a lateral type motion, which when you're painting, weathering, and even installing the piece tend to happen at times. You can obviously do it. I've done it several times on this channel and I showed it. However, the chance of breaking is pretty much nil on metal tracks. That's, again, it's a huge benefit that they do have. And whenever you get the opportunity to go with metal, it's definitely one I highly recommend. As for these particular tracks here, they were excellent. The castings were nice and clean. There really wasn't all that much cleanup that needed to be done on them. I have also, like I stated before, done a pair of Ferdinand / Elefant tracks from Frill Model, and those went together very similar to these ones over here. However, those ones needed, from memory serves, just a little bit more cleanup compared to these examples. So these tracks here are definitely a leg up in that regard, ever so slightly, but still, it's a leg up nonetheless. These things here time absolutely flawlessly with the Dragon sprockets, and these tracks are beyond recommended if you have any of the Dragon Ferdinand or Elefant kits that have been released in 1/35 scale. And there are quite a few. If these tracks will be able to work on the Italeri, the Tamiya, or the Amusing Hobby kits, that I can't say, because obviously I haven't installed them on there. However, I will say that on the Dragon kits here, they made absolutely perfectly, which is a benefit because generally these kits have the dreaded individual link and link tracks. And yes, I assembled a set for the spare sections. No, it wasn't that easy. There was nothing magic about magic tracks. They suck. It's an individual link and link and track, and those are awful just by definition. Anyway, so that's all the positive attributes that these tracks have. But this does have some negative attributes as well. It's a trade-off. And the biggest negative attribute that the tracks have is their cost. The metal tracks, specifically these ones over here, tend to run almost the same price, and sometimes, depending on how much the kit is, even more than the original kit in question. So if you are working on a budget, you're very budget conscious, perhaps the metal tracks here is something that may be cost prohibitive. Are they worth it? Oh, hell yeah, they're definitely worth it. But if you're the type of person that's in a situation where budget is important to you, perhaps the metal tracks may be something not to look at. There are, I believe, some plastic alternatives on the market for Elefant / Ferdinands. I haven't done any yet, nor have I really looked, but I'm pretty sure there might be some out there from one make or another. Again, having said that, it's way better to roll with the metal ones than even attempt the link and link tracks. Those things are just worthless on any given day, and the metal ones are just always the better way to go. Even if you don't have a big budget to work on, it's a fantastic investment for your build. However, having said all that, in my opinion, the pros definitely outweigh the negatives immensely, and this model here is almost a perfect build because of it. It definitely enhances the build. It looks far more realistic than anything the Link and Link tracks could potentially even attempt, and at the end of the day, this is what Link and Link tracks pretend that they can do. That's how good these metal ones are. As for this build here, really the only thing that's left is to mount on the spare tracks and also mount on the tow hooks, but that's going to be done off camera, and that's going to be something that's going to be mentioned in the actual model showcase video for this build here, which by the time this video makes its debut has already been posted. I recommend checking it out in case you didn't already. One last thing I want to mention about the tracks is that you do have ample amount of leftover tracks as spares. As you can see right here, these are just tracks that weren't used on this build, and generally you do have a decent number of spares on your workable tracks from some make or another, but as you can see, you have a decent amount. that's not just true for the links themselves, but also for the pins. As you can see, there's quite a number of pins left in this baggie over here, and these things will probably come in handy on another project that comes down the road. As for construction, I didn't really have any oopsie type moments. Sometimes some tracks are either not properly molded and they don't come out great, or sometimes you are accidentally assembling them and something can go wrong. And I really didn't have that happen to me on this one over here. This was because, again, of the pin vise with the pin. This definitely makes the assembly of these tracks go together much more smoother and quicker, as opposed to just trying to go in raw. So this is definitely something you should definitely look into, specifically if you're rolling with not just these tracks, but really any of the other tracks that are similar to this. And I guess after that glowing review, that wraps up this 1/35th scale workable track link tutorial video for the ACE model 1/35th scale Ferdinand or Elefant metal workable track links. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe to this channel, where it's a great way to keep up to date on new posted content, being other workable track link tutorial and review videos like this one here, or the other smaller scale model showcase videos and larger scale project update videos that frequently get posted. Another way to keep in the loop of new posted content is by liking us on Facebook, where I have more photographs of all of the smaller and larger scale builds that have been shown on this channel in the past. Furthermore, don't forget to swing by EastCoastArmory.com for more 1/6 and 1/16 scale builds and detail components. Thanks again. I'll be seeing you all again on the next one. Till then.